Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. This is the Psychology in Seattle YouTube channel. As I always say, don't use YouTube as a replacement for therapy. If you need a therapist, get one. You deserve it. You really do. Let's watch.
One friend say, go to the therapy. I don't know, maybe you need talk. And the therapy, remember, he say, you never talk for guys, you all the time for girls. Do you think you are lesbian? I say, oh my God. I understand everything right now.
Okay, so that warms the heart to know that she discovered herself, which is wonderful, and is an indictment on various cultures that will suppress and oppress people who are like this. If we lived in a different society, and societies are changing all the time, then people would know early in life that they were gay. And so I'm glad she eventually was able to discover herself and be allowed to be herself. And it is doubly great for me in my profession that she found out in therapy. I was a little kind of worried as she was talking about the story. She was leading up to her discovery of being a lesbian, and she's in therapy, and I'm like, oh God, what's the therapist going to say? And the therapist is like, do you think maybe you're a lesbian? And then she's, is summarizing the discovery, and she's like, oh my God, maybe I am. And of course, she knew what being gay was before that question came up. But because of societal oppression and family oppression, those voices in the head are counteracted. There's just inner core human being from the inside saying, I'm gay, I'm gay, I'm gay. And then on the outside, there's this other voice that's just like, no, don't acknowledge that. There's so many consequences that means you're evil, you're going to go to hell or whatever. I mean, literally, right? So when someone comes along and gives permission, just a little bit of a catalyst of just like, you might be gay and it's okay if you're gay. And then there's boom, and then the self just explodes past all those voices and oppression. And it's just great that that therapist asked that question. And it just points to how important therapy is for a lot of people, not only obviously for this, but for a lot of different self-discoveries. It warms the heart that she had that experience. So I've been taking notes on her, Jeymi, 30 years old, Venezuelan in Bogota. And I think from my understanding that a lot of Venezuelans immigrated or fled to Colombia because of the economic strife and the political strife. When I was in Bogota with my co-host Humberto, I met an Uber driver who was Venezuelan living in Bogota, and he talked about his story. It was kind of a longer ride, so I had a chance to talk to him for a while. And he told me that in his town in Venezuela, him and his parents were all academics. They were professors. I can't remember in what. I think it was the medical field. And they were very, high up in the academic professional world. But because of the economic and political strife in Venezuela, they had to flee. And so they fled, crossing the border into Colombia, which has a much more stable political and economic situation. And so they're better off. But the Colombian economy or system didn't recognize the education or I can't remember exactly, the opportunities weren't the same in Bogota as they were in Venezuela. And so they would all have to take other kinds of jobs, like being an Uber driver instead of being a physician or a professor. And although he was appreciative of that opportunity, it was definitely a bummer for him to have to give up his career and to watch his parents also have to give up their careers. So it just points to how there's a lot of unfortunate things happening in the world that I don't know I know a little bit about the situation in Venezuela, but not enough to even talk about what's happening. I just know that there's a lot of disparity, a lot of corruption, a lot of unfairness. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the overall topic sentence. And so I don't know, but I wonder if Jeymi is one of those individuals that fled for that reason, or if she just left Venezuela to go to Bogota. I don't know. I can't remember if they mentioned that.
Have you and Jeymi talked about your narcolepsy? Does she understand how it affects you and what it does to you?
She says she does, but until I'm actually there and she experiences it firsthand, she's not really going to. Several years ago, I was diagnosed with narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is a sleep disorder.
Okay, so we're learning a bit more about Kris. I just jotted down some notes. 40 years old, from Alabama, small town, Bible Belt, and she identified the town as being anti-gay, anti-bisexual, and she works at a shipping company and in school security. And she met Jeymi, that we talked about earlier, in Bogota online, and they had a 1-year online relationship, and they have never met in person. And we're also learning here that Kris has narcolepsy. Narcolepsy often, especially in the past, less so now, was always played up for laughs. Like someone in a movie or a cartoon would just suddenly fall asleep and then they'd suddenly wake up and would be played for laughs. Narcolepsy is no joke. It is one of the worst things you could ever have. I mean, it is very debilitating, depending on the degree of the disorder, but it, can cause people to suddenly fall asleep, but it also can cause people to just sort of half fall asleep or enter into this kind of mixed state where they're sort of asleep and not asleep. And it's very upsetting. I mean, just imagine for yourself that throughout the day, and I'm sure you have experienced this at times, like late at night, or you didn't get a good night's sleep the night before, and you just feel like you're not fully awake. You can't really get your energy going, and your brain isn't working quite right. Well, just imagine that that's happening like periodically throughout the day. There are medications. The medications have side effects. They don't always work very well. Sometimes they can work really well. So, yeah, having narcolepsy is pretty rough. She says that Jeymi, her partner, understands that she has narcolepsy, but might not understand the full extent of it. I'm guessing we'll find out more of that as we watch.
My brain doesn't know when it's nighttime and daytime and when you're supposed to sleep and when you're not. I have memory problems. I have sleep spells. I'll just fall asleep in the middle of eating dinner. Every day is a battle.
Right. That's what you'll hear from people with narcolepsy, is that every day is a battle. You know how for other people, for most, if you don't have a disorder that's, like MS or something along these lines, every once in a while you have a bad day. Maybe you drank too much the night before, or for whatever reason you were in your head and couldn't sleep the night before, so you didn't get a good night's sleep, or you are sick or something. But for the most part, on average, every day you wake up and you have a certain amount of energy and you get your life in order or whatever. And then you wind down at the end of the day and you go to sleep. For people with narcolepsy, typically like every day is like, well, what's going to happen today? And how do I dial in exactly how things are going to work? And the other thing is, their sleep at night might not be very rejuvenating, even though they're asleep. Also, sometimes with narcolepsy, they'll have trouble sleeping. It can really just screw everything up, and it's torture. Narcolepsy is torture.
And you've given her all the money you got, she's going to say, see ya.
That's a fair concern, especially knowing that I was sending money to her. And
I know.
And then I found out about her talking to somebody else. 6 months ago, I found out that Jeymi was talking to a woman from Texas. I received.
Okay, so we're learning from Kris that Kris caught Jeymi talking to another woman. Looking at my notes, their relationship, they've never met. They met online a year ago. They were dating over online, and as the show goes on in the season, they plan on meeting up in person for the very first time. And during that time, when they were apart, Kris gets this text from another person, and she says, I have a question. I met Jeymi in a dating app. We started talking the end of June. She asked me to be her girlfriend. I looked her up on Facebook, and I see she just posted she was in a relationship with you. Just wondering what the deal with that. I do have proof to back up what I'm saying. So we don't know. Maybe this other person is lying. I mean, the way Jeymi came across, she certainly seemed genuine, but, it's hard to say. The other thing is sometimes people make bad choices. Also, it's possible that Jeymi, I don't know why I'm making excuses for Jeymi. I guess I'm just hoping for this relationship to work out. And I need to be careful about that because my hopes are usually dashed. Usually everyone turns out to have problems on the show. So I don't know. But anyway, let's continue watching.
A message from this other woman. She found me on social media. She told me that Jeymi was using me for money. When Jeymi was sick with COVID, I did help pay her bills. When I confronted her about it, Jeymi denied it.
I mean, this would be the nightmare if you're in that sort of position where you're an American and people are all telling you, oh, they're scamming you, everyone's just catfishing or trying to get money out of you or something like that. And then you get a message from someone saying, I'm another American who I have also been flirted with by this same person online, and they told me, or I figured out, that they're just scamming everyone for money, and who knows how many other women or people in the world that this Jeymi character is manipulating. Certainly that's the nightmare. But if Kris is still wanting to marry Jeymi, they must have recovered sufficiently. So I don't know.
This other woman told me that Jeymi had been working the entire time. She told me she was at home sick with COVID. I understand why Jeymi started talking to this other woman. I hurt her by ghosting her, so she hurt me. Jeymi begged and begged me to forgive her. And
okay, so Kris just said that she ghosted Jeymi during that year-long online relationship, and Jeymi was hurt by that. So I guess you could argue that Jeymi didn't cheat. She was just moving on with her life and met another woman. That's what it sounds like.
She promised to cut all ties to the woman in Texas. She's been really, really trying to make up for it. In my heart, I couldn't stand the thought of not being able to talk to her.
Okay, so another opportunity for me to talk about apologies. And if someone is caught cheating, or even not caught cheating, and they want to apologize for it, one of the markers of research shows that to elicit forgiveness and moving on from your partner, whether it's a romantic situation with cheating or even if you just betrayed a friend or a family member or a coworker, one of the ways that you will garner acceptance is if you put a lot of effort into trying to make up for it and trying to gain forgiveness, trying to show how sorrowful you are. A lot of people think, well, especially in cheating situations, I'll have couples come into my office trying to recover from infidelity that may have happened last week or might have happened 20 years ago. And the couple is still not over it. And one of the things that I'll hear from the cheating person is they'll say, well, I've already apologized for it, so I don't know why it keeps coming up. And the amount of pain and hurt and negative effect that the transgression causes in the person who was transgressed upon is commensurate with the amount of apologizing that needs to happen in order for forgiveness to occur, typically. So if, for example, I accidentally bump into my wife as I'm walking down the hallway, which is a weird thing to happen, then I probably don't need to apologize for 20 years, right? I probably just need to say, oh, sorry, and that's good enough. But if I were to cheat on my wife, God forbid, then I would, God forbid, I just know I won't do it. I don't know why God has to be involved, but I would have to apologize to her probably for the rest of my life occasionally, because that is a humongous transgression. So what we hear from Kris is that Jeymi put a lot of effort into apologizing, I'm guessing in a variety of ways, in a variety of instances, over a variety of times. And Kris seems to have forgiven her because of that. You know, the reason why this is not to make the transgressor, grovel and beg you for forgiveness on their knees. It's to demonstrate that you care, right? So, for example, if, well, let's just say someone else were to cheat on their spouse. Oh, Jeymi, let's say, Jeymi cheats on or has some sort of transgression. I don't know if it's technically cheating if Kris had ghosted Jeymi, but some sort of transgression. And Jeymi were to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. And that's it. Never talks about it again. Kris exhibits further skepticism or further hurt or pain or standoffishness. And Jeymi's like, I don't know why you're so standoffish. I already apologized. Well, that is probably not going to go over very well. What it shows is that you don't really recognize as the transgressor the magnitude of what you did. It also doesn't show that you have the commensurate amount of sorrow, because if you truly recognize a transgression, you would feel so much sorrow that you could not encapsulate it in one instance of apology. Plus, the sorrow would persist over time. It wouldn't just be some sorrow, you apologize and it's over. Yeah. Whereas if I accidentally bump into my wife walking in the hallway, I don't have a tremendous amount of sorrow. I might, I guess, have a tiny little bit of regret or worry that I hurt her or something, I suppose. But it's not a huge amount, right? And my wife wouldn't expect me to have that. But in a cheating situation, you would hope that the person has a tremendous amount of sorrow and will express that. And one of the ways we express sorrow is through apologizing or just saying that we feel sorry or sorrow. Maybe, is that, wow, sorrow and sorry. Are those related? Let me look it up. Okay, according to the internet, very quickly, they're both words from Old English, but although they sound familiar, they are not related. All right. Anyway, but let's go back and listen to what Kris said as to how much apologizing Jeymi did.
Why Jeymi started talking to this other woman. I hurt her by ghosting her, so she hurt me. Jeymi begged and begged me to.
By the way, that is a reason why people will cheat, as a way of passive-aggressively getting back at someone. In my experience, cheating is never the way that people portray it, like a self-centered narcissistic act. It is almost always an act of desperation, an act of psychological distress. I suppose there are outliers in which some people are literally just completely self-centered and don't care about others. I mean, certainly there are psychopathic people out there. But generally speaking, outside of psychopathy and antisocial personality, people who cheat are cheating out of suffering. It doesn't justify it. It's always morally wrong. You are doing something knowing that you are very likely going to harm another human being, and you can avoid it by breaking up with your partner or just by not cheating. We're not that... we're not that driven by our drives. That's funny. We're not that hapless when it comes to our drives to cheat. You know what I mean? We're not completely at the mercy of impulses. We can push back on it, especially cheating, because cheating takes thousands of decisions to go down the road to cheat. It's not just something that just happens the way that people will claim it. It's like, I don't know, something just happened that night. It's like, well, you put yourself in that situation. You didn't take measures to avoid it. There's just a lot of things unless you were literally assaulted, in which that's not cheating. Obviously, that's you getting assaulted. So I don't know why I had to delineate that, but that just popped in my head. So what we're hearing, according to Kris, is that Jeymi cheated because she was trying to get back at Kris, because she was trying to send a message. It's like, you're going to hurt me, and I'm going to hurt you back. And we all do this, some version of this. When we feel hurt by our partners or really anyone in our life, and we don't trust that we can be upfront, like, hey, you hurt my feelings yesterday, we will resort to other ways of passively communicating that through either trying to hurt them back. It's a passive aggression, a hidden hostility to try to... The hope is that if I hurt you in this way, you will be able to empathize with me and you won't hurt me again like you did before. Of course, that is an absurd notion. Like someone punches you in the face and you're just like, you punch them 5 times in the face, or they bump into you and you punch them 5 times in the face, and you're hoping that somehow they'll receive those 5 punches as a lesson in how you should not hurt me. People don't take it that way. They're just like, ow, why? And then it just goes back and forth like that, right? Another thing that people will do is they will give someone the silent treatment. So that often is a message. It's a very dysfunctional, obscured message, but the silent treatment is a message to the other person of, I you hurt my feelings, you scared me somehow, and I'm going to do this behavior, and I hope you interpret it as a punishment or a reaction to what you did to me yesterday, and you will never do that thing again. People resort to these hidden, passive ways of communicating because they've learned through past experiences that they can't be upfront. They can't just go to someone and say, you hurt my feelings. So it sounds like Jeymi did that. I wonder if we'll run into that in the future. Well, Jeymi will have a hard time being upfront and saying, hey, you hurt my feelings. I mean, Jeymi seems pretty healthy in terms of that, but in this situation, at least from Kris's perspective, we're hearing a passive-aggressive act.
And she promised to cut all ties to the woman in Texas. She's been really, really trying to make up for it. In my heart, I couldn't stand the thought.
So we're hearing that from Kris's perspective, Jeymi's been really, really putting effort. And when I hear that Jeymi probably did enough a while back and then much more. And then at some point, and that's really what you want to get out of your partner if you commit a major transgression, is the point where your partner is just like, oh my God, thank you for apologizing. It's great. You don't need to do it anymore. It's actually just getting kind of annoying. So I forgive you. Or you've apologized enough to give me enough reason to go down a road of forgiveness. So, I believe you. Now, sometimes if you apologize in a very annoying way, like you just keep saying the words, but you don't really mean it, you can get someone to say, shut up about the apologizing already, because the transgressed upon person isn't actually getting what they really want. It's complicated. But I hear in Kris's voice that Jeymi apologized sufficiently for Kris's measure anyway. All right. Well, if you've ever reached out to me, if you've ever emailed me from the website, there's a link below. The best way that you can get me to answer your question on a podcast episode, an audio podcast, is if you're a patron of the podcast, because I get a lot of emails and I wish I could address all of them. I really do. I really love your questions. I think every question is valuable and interesting, and I want to help in whatever way I can. Of course, I can't provide therapy over the internet, but I can provide education. And I want to answer all the questions, but I don't have time to get to every question. So I just tend to prioritize patrons because they are supporting what we're doing here. I literally could not be doing any of this right now if it weren't for the patrons. I would have to be working at the university full time, and I'd have to have a half-time private practice, and that would mean I wouldn't have really any time to do this sort of stuff. So patrons give me that ability, and so I like to give back to them in that way. So if you want me to read your email on an audio podcast, becoming especially an upper tier patron will most likely push your email up to the top of the list. But I'm just throwing it out there. No biggie if you're not interested, and take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.